A wrong turn through hospital doors, a dying woman with no one by her side, 4 months later standing at the altar. This is the story of how one mistake became the greatest blessing of my life, and I'm about to tell you everything that happened in that room, the promise I made, and why I knew within minutes that I had to marry this woman I'd never met before. Stay with me, because what she said to me in her final hours will change how you see life forever. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I rushed through the hospital corridor, my hands trembling as I clutched the visitor's pass. Room 314. That's what they told me at the front desk. My colleague from work, Marcus, had been in a car accident and I needed to see him before his surgery. I turned left past the nurse's station, counting the room numbers as I went. 310, 312, 314. I pushed open the door without knocking, already forming the words of encouragement I'd rehearsed in my mind during the drive over. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. This wasn't Marcus. The woman lying in that hospital bed was thin, her dark skin almost grey against the white sheets, and she was alone. Completely alone. No flowers on the nightstand, no cards pinned to the board, no family members keeping vigil in the plastic chairs. Just her, connected to machines that beeped rhythmically in the silence. I froze in the doorway, my mind racing to process what I was seeing. I'd walked into the wrong room. I should have apologized and left immediately, but I didn't. I couldn't. Because in that split second our eyes met, and what I saw in her gaze stopped me cold. She wasn't surprised to see a stranger. She wasn't confused or alarmed. Instead, there was something else there. Something that looked like relief, like she'd been waiting for someone, anyone, to walk through that door. Her lips moved slightly, and I found myself stepping closer instead of backing away. "I'm so sorry," I started to say. "I have the wrong room." But she shook her head, just barely, and whispered in a voice so soft I had to lean in to hear it. "No, you don't. You're exactly where you need to be." Those words hit me like a physical force. I stood there, this complete stranger in a dying woman's hospital room, and everything logical in my brain was screaming at me to leave, to find the right room, to get back to my normal life. But my feet wouldn't move. Something bigger than logic was happening here, and I could feel it in every cell of my body. I pulled up one of those plastic chairs and sat down beside her bed. "My name is David," I told her. "What's yours?" She smiled then, the smallest curve of her lips, and said, "Grace. My name is Grace. I need you to understand something about that moment. I'm not the kind of person who believes in fate or destiny or signs from above. I'm a practical man, an accountant who lives by numbers and facts and things I can prove on a spreadsheet." But sitting there with Grace, watching the afternoon light filter through the blinds and paint stripes across her hospital blanket, I felt the hand of God moving in that room as clearly as I've ever felt anything in my life. This wasn't chance. This wasn't coincidence. This was divine intervention, and I was about to discover why. Grace started talking, and I started listening. She told me she was 42 years old, that she'd been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer 6 months earlier, that the doctors had given her weeks, maybe days. She told me about her life, about growing up in Atlanta, about her love for gardening and old gospel music, and the way rain smelled on hot pavement. She told me about her dreams that would never come true now, about the children she'd never had, about the man who'd left her when the diagnosis came, taking with him any illusion that she wouldn't die alone. And as she talked, something inside me cracked wide open. Have you ever met someone and felt like you'd known them your entire life, like your souls recognized each other even though your bodies were strangers? That's what happened with Grace. Every word she spoke resonated with something deep in my chest. Every story she shared felt like a piece of a puzzle I didn't know I was missing. I found myself telling her things I'd never told anyone, about my own loneliness, about my failed engagement 2 years before, about how I'd thrown myself into work to avoid facing the emptiness of my apartment and my life. We talked for hours that first day. The sun set outside her window. The nurses came and went, and still we talked. When visiting hours ended and I finally had to leave, Grace reached out and took my hand. Her grip was weak, her fingers cold, but the touch sent electricity through my entire arm. "Will you come back tomorrow?" she asked. "I promise," I told her. And I meant it with every fiber of my being. I walked out of that hospital room, found the correct room where Marcus was recovering just fine from his surgery, spent 10 minutes with him, and then drove home in a daze. I couldn't stop thinking about Grace, about her smile, about the way she'd looked at me like I mattered, like my presence was a gift instead of an intrusion. I went back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Every evening after work, I'd drive straight to the hospital, park in the same spot, walk through the same doors, and spend hours in room 314 with a woman who was teaching me what it meant to truly live, even as she was dying. We talked about everything. Faith and fear, regret and redemption, the big questions and the small moments that make up a life. Grace had a way of seeing the world that was both heartbreaking and beautiful, and being around her made me want to be a better man. On the 5th day, something shifted between us. Grace was having a good day, sitting up in bed, her eyes brighter than I'd seen them. She looked at me for a long moment and then asked a question that changed everything. "David, why are you here? Not just today, but every day. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why do you keep coming back?" I opened my mouth to give her some easy answer, some comfortable lie about being a good person or doing the right thing. But the words that came out were the truth, raw and unfiltered. Because when I'm with you, I feel alive for the first time in years. Because you see me, really see me, in a way no one else ever has. Because I think God put me in the wrong room on purpose, so I could find exactly what I'd been missing. Grace's eyes filled with tears, and so did mine. We sat there in that sterile hospital room, two broken people who'd found something precious in the most unlikely place, and we both knew that what was happening between us was bigger than cancer, bigger than death, bigger than any obstacle the world could throw at us. That night, Grace told me something that would haunt me for weeks to come. She said, "David, I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me. I'm dying. That's not going to change. But for the first time since my diagnosis, I don't feel alone. You've given me the greatest gift anyone could give, and I need you to know that whatever happens, you've made these last days worth living." But I wasn't ready to accept that. I couldn't accept it. In the 2 weeks that followed, I watched Grace decline. Some days she could barely keep her eyes open. Other days the pain was so intense that even morphine couldn't touch it. The doctors pulled me aside more than once, confused about who I was and why I was there, since I wasn't family. I told them I was a friend, which felt like the understatement of the century. What Grace and I had transcended friendship, transcended romance, transcended every category I'd ever tried to put relationships into. We were two souls that had found each other against all odds, and I wasn't going to let her go without a fight. I started researching clinical trials, experimental treatments, specialists across the country who might have answers the local doctors didn't. I made calls, sent emails, begged and pleaded with anyone who would listen. Grace would watch me with this sad, knowing smile and tell me to stop, that I was fighting a battle that was already lost. But I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. Because the alternative was unthinkable. The alternative was a world without Grace in it, and I'd only known her for 3 weeks, but I couldn't imagine going back to the grey, empty existence I'd had before. Then came the day that everything crystallized. I walked into Grace's room and found her crying, really crying, her whole body shaking with sobs. I rushed to her side, terrified that the pain had gotten worse or that the doctors had delivered even more bad news. But when she finally could speak, what she said broke my heart in a completely different way. "I'm so scared, David. Not of dying. I've made my peace with that. But I'm scared of dying alone, of leaving this world without anyone to remember me, without anyone to care that I was here. I'm scared that when I'm gone, it'll be like I never existed at all. I didn't think, I didn't plan, I didn't consider the implications or the logistics or what anyone would think. I just took Grace's hand in both of mine, looked into her eyes and said the words that were burning in my chest. Marry me. Marry me, Grace. I know it sounds crazy. I know we've only known each other for 3 weeks. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Marry me and I swear to God I will make sure you're not alone. I will make sure you're loved and cherished and remembered for the incredible woman you are. Marry me and let me give you whatever time we have left together. The room went absolutely silent except for the beeping of the monitors. Grace stared at me like I'd lost my mind, and maybe I had. Maybe grief and desperation had pushed me over some edge I didn't even know existed. But then she smiled, this radiant, glowing smile that lit up her whole face despite the illness ravaging her body. And she whispered, "Yes. Yes, David. Yes, I'll marry you. Let me ask you something. And I really want you to think about this. Write your answer in the comments below. If you knew you only had a short time with someone, would you choose to love them anyway? Or would you protect yourself from the pain of losing them? Because that's the choice I faced, and I chose love. I chose Grace. And I've never regretted it for a single second. The hospital staff thought I was insane. My family thought I'd had some kind of breakdown. My friends staged an intervention, sitting me down and asking if I understood what I was doing, marrying a woman I barely knew who was terminally ill. But none of them understood. They didn't see what I saw when I looked at Grace. They didn't feel what I felt when she held my hand. They didn't know that in 3 weeks this woman had taught me more about love, faith, and what it means to be truly alive than I'd learned in my entire 40 years on this planet. We started planning a wedding, which sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud. Planning a wedding for a bride who might not live to see the ceremony, but Grace was determined, and watching her light up as we talked about flowers and music and vows gave me a purpose I'd never had before. We decided to do it in the hospital chapel, small and simple, with whatever nurses and staff wanted to attend since Grace had no family, and I didn't want to force my skeptical relatives to pretend to support something they didn't understand. Grace had good days and bad days. On the good days, we'd work on wedding details, and she'd tell me stories about the dress she'd always imagined wearing, the kind of cake she loved, the songs that made her cry. On the bad days, I'd just sit with her, holding her hand, reading to her from the Bible when she was too weak to do it herself, praying prayers I'd never prayed before for a miracle I wasn't sure would come. Through it all, I felt God's presence in that room like a tangible thing, like He was orchestrating every moment of this impossible love story, for reasons I couldn't fully understand but trusted completely. The wedding was set for 4 months from the day we met, which the doctors said was optimistic at best. But Grace rallied. Against all odds and medical predictions, she rallied. We started a new treatment protocol, more aggressive than anything they'd tried before, and while it made her sick and weak, it also seemed to slow the cancer's progression. The doctors called it unusual. I called it an answer to prayer. Grace called it God giving her just enough time to become my wife. I spent every free moment at that hospital. I'd go to work, put in my hours, and then drive straight to Grace's room. We'd have dinner together, me eating hospital cafeteria food while she picked at whatever she could keep down. We'd watch old movies on her laptop, play cards, talk about the life we'd have together in whatever time God granted us. And slowly, impossibly, I fell deeper in love with this woman who'd come into my life through a wrong door at exactly the right moment. Here's what I learned in those months leading up to our wedding. Love isn't about time. It's not about how many years you spend with someone or how many memories you accumulate. Love is about depth, about connection, about choosing to see another person's soul and saying, yes, I want to know you, I want to cherish you, I want to walk beside you for however long we have. I knew Grace more intimately after 3 months than I'd known my ex-fiancé after 3 years, because Grace and I didn't have the luxury of surface-level conversations and comfortable silences. Every moment mattered. Every word counted. We lived entire lifetimes in those hospital room hours. The wedding day arrived on a Tuesday in September. I'd arranged everything with the help of a few nurses who'd become invested in our story. The hospital chapel was decorated with white roses, Grace's favorite. A local pastor who volunteered at the hospital agreed to officiate. I wore the best suit I owned, my hands shaking as I waited at the altar for my bride. And then Grace appeared in the doorway, and I forgot how to breathe. She was in a wheelchair, pushed by her favorite nurse, but she was beautiful. Someone had helped her with makeup and hair, and she wore a simple white dress we'd ordered online, altered to fit her frail frame. But it wasn't the dress or the makeup that made her beautiful. It was the joy radiating from her face, the love shining in her eyes, the absolute peace that surrounded her like a halo. She looked at me like I was her miracle, but she had it backward. She was mine. The ceremony was short because Grace tired easily, but every word was sacred. When the pastor asked if I took this woman to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish till death do us part, I said I do with a conviction that came from the deepest part of my soul. And when Grace said those same words back to me, her voice weak but steady, I felt the presence of God in that chapel so strongly that I could have sworn the air itself was vibrating with holiness. We kissed as husband and wife, and the small gathering of nurses and hospital staff who'd witnessed our impossible love story erupted in applause and tears. Grace was crying. I was crying. And for one perfect moment, cancer didn't exist. Pain didn't exist. Death didn't exist. There was only love, pure and powerful and eternal, the kind of love that proves God is real because nothing else could create something so beautiful out of something so broken. The reception was in Grace's hospital room because that's all she could manage, but it was perfect. We had cake that the kitchen staff had made special, and one of the nurses had created a playlist of Grace's favorite gospel songs. We danced, or rather I held Grace in my arms and swayed gently, while she rested her head against my chest and we moved to the music. It was the most precious dance of my life, that slow shuffle in a hospital room with my dying wife, and I wouldn't trade it for 1,000 ballroom waltzes. That night, after everyone had left and Grace was settled back in her bed, she looked at me with tears streaming down her face and said, "Thank you, David. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for making me feel loved and valued and like my life mattered." I held her hand and told her the truth. "You saved me, Grace. I was the one dying before I met you. I was going through the motions, existing but not living. And you taught me what it means to be truly alive. This isn't me saving you, this is us saving each other. Now I know what some of you might be thinking. You're wondering if Grace survived. You're wondering if there was a miracle, if the cancer went into remission, if we got our happily ever after. And I'm going to tell you the truth, because Grace taught me that truth, even when it's hard, is always better than comfortable lies. Grace lived for 7 more months after our wedding. 7 months that were filled with more love, more joy, more genuine connection than most people experience in a lifetime. 7 months where we celebrated every small victory, every good day, every moment of grace that God granted us. 7 months where I got to be a husband to the most remarkable woman I've ever known. But cancer is cruel, and eventually it won. On a quiet morning in April, with me holding her hand and whispering how much I loved her, Grace took her last breath and went home to be with the Lord. The grief nearly destroyed me. For weeks after she died, I could barely function. I'd go to work and stare at my computer screen without seeing it. I'd come home to my empty apartment and expect to see her there, even though she'd never lived there, even though the only place we'd ever been together was that hospital room. The loss was enormous, a crater in my chest that I thought would never heal. But here's the thing about grief. It's just love with nowhere to go. And Grace taught me that love never dies. Not really. It changes form, it transforms, but it endures. So I took that grief, that overwhelming love I had for my wife, and I started doing something with it. I started volunteering at the hospital, visiting patients who had no family, sitting with people who were alone and scared and facing their own mortality. I became for others what I'd accidentally become for Grace that day. I walked into the wrong room. And you know what I discovered? I discovered that Grace's story, our story, had the power to change lives. When I sat with dying patients and told them about the woman I'd married after knowing her for 3 weeks, about how love found us in the most unlikely place, about how God used a wrong turn to create something beautiful, I saw hope light up in their eyes. I saw them start to believe that their lives mattered, that they weren't alone, that even in their darkest hour, there could be grace. Grace left me something in her will. Not money, because she didn't have any. Not possessions, because everything she owned fit in a single box. She left me a letter, written in her shaky handwriting during one of her last good days, and in that letter, she told me something that I carry with me every single day. She wrote, "David, my beloved husband, by the time you read this, I'll be gone, but I need you to know that you gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. You saw me. Not the cancer, not the dying woman, but me. The real me. And in seeing me, you helped me see myself as God sees me, valuable and loved and worthy. Don't mourn me, my love. Celebrate what we had. And please, please keep walking into wrong rooms. Keep seeing people. Keep loving recklessly. Because that's what you were put on this earth to do, so I did. I walk into wrong rooms all the time now, figuratively speaking. I see people that society overlooks. I love without counting the cost. I live every day with the awareness that life is precious and brief, and we don't get to waste a single moment on fear or hesitation or playing it safe. Grace taught me that. In the 7 months we had as husband and wife, she taught me more about living than most people learn in 80 years. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, if I regret marrying a dying woman, if I regret signing up for inevitable heartbreak, if I regret choosing the pain of loss over the safety of never loving at all. And my answer is always the same. I regret nothing. Not 1 second, not 1 tear, not 1 moment of that impossible, beautiful, God-ordained love story, because Grace was worth it. The love we shared was worth it. The man I became through loving her was worth it. Let me tell you what I believe, what I know in the deepest part of my soul to be true. I believe that God orchestrates divine appointments in our lives all the time, but most of us are too busy, or too distracted, or too scared to recognize them. I believe that I was supposed to walk into that wrong room, that Grace was supposed to be alone in that bed, that everything in both our lives led us to that exact moment, for a reason bigger than either of us could understand. I believe that love is the most powerful force in the universe, stronger than cancer, stronger than death, stronger than anything that tries to diminish or destroy it. And I believe that Grace is waiting for me, not in that hospital room, not in the cemetery where her body rests, but in heaven, where there's no more pain or suffering or tears. I believe that one day, when my time on this earth is done, I'm going to walk through those gates and see her standing there, whole and healthy and radiant, with that smile that stopped my heart the first time I saw it. And we're going to have eternity together, which is what we should have had all along. But until that day comes, I have work to do. I have rooms to walk into, people to see, lives to touch, with the lessons Grace taught me. I have a mission to live so fully, so authentically, so courageously, that when people look at me, they see the impact that one dying woman had on a lost man who stumbled into her room by accident. Because it wasn't an accident. It was never an accident. It was grace. It was grace. Think about your own life for a moment. How many times have you walked past an opportunity to connect with someone because it was inconvenient or uncomfortable or outside your normal routine? How many divine appointments have you missed because you were too focused on getting to the right room that you didn't stop to see who needed you in the wrong one? How many Graces are out there right now, alone and scared and waiting for someone to see them? I'm challenging you today to be that person. Walk into the wrong rooms, see the invisible people, love without a safety net. Because I promise you, the rewards are greater than anything you can imagine. I want to end by telling you the most important thing I learned from my brief marriage to Grace. She taught me that we're not promised tomorrow. We're not promised next year or next month or even the next hour. All we have is right now, this moment, and what we choose to do with it. We can choose fear, or we can choose love. We can choose to protect ourselves from pain, or we can choose to open our hearts to whatever God brings our way, knowing that even if it hurts, even if it breaks us, it's worth it. Because love always wins. Always. Even when it looks like death has the final word, love endures. Love transforms. Love redeems. Grace is gone, but the impact of her life, of our love, ripples out into eternity. Every person I sit with at that hospital, every lonely soul I connect with, every life I touch with her story, is proof that love never dies. It multiplies. It grows. It changes the world in ways we can't predict or measure. That's the legacy Grace left behind. Not in children or grandchildren or material possessions, but in lives changed, hearts opened, and a man who learned to love without limits because a dying woman showed him how. So the next time you're rushing through your day, focused on getting to the right room, the right meeting, the right destination, I want you to remember this story. Remember that sometimes the wrong room is exactly where you need to be. Remember that God uses our mistakes, our wrong turns, our accidents to create miracles we never saw coming. Remember that every person you meet, every interaction you have, could be a divine appointment disguised as an ordinary moment. Don't miss it. Don't miss your grace. I married a dying woman 4 months after meeting her in a hospital room I entered by mistake, and it was the best decision I ever made. It cost me everything and gave me more than I ever dreamed possible. It broke my heart and healed my soul. It taught me that love is always worth the risk, always worth the pain, always worth saying yes to, even when every logical part of your brain is screaming no. Grace saved my life by letting me into hers, and I will spend the rest of my days making sure her story, our story, inspires others to love boldly, live fully, and trust that God's plan is always better than our own. Before I go, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment where a mistake or wrong turn led to something beautiful? Have you ever felt God directing your steps to someone who needed you, or who you needed? Share your story in the comments below, because I truly believe that we all have these divine appointment moments, and when we share them, we encourage others to recognize their own. Your story matters. Your experience could be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. So don't hold back. Tell me about your grace, your wrong room that became the right room, your moment of unexpected blessing. And if you're watching this and you're in a hospital room right now alone and scared and wondering if anyone cares, I want you to know something. You matter. Your life has value. And somewhere out there, there's a David looking for his grace, a person who will walk through that door and see you, really see you, and choose to love you exactly as you are. Don't give up hope. Don't give up faith, because God specializes in wrong rooms and divine appointments and love stories that defy all logic. Your story isn't over yet. Thank you for watching, for listening, for allowing me to share the most sacred chapter of my life with you. Grace would have loved knowing that her story touched your heart, that the love we shared for 7 brief months continues to inspire and encourage people she never met. That's the power of love. That's the power of saying yes to what God brings into your life, even when it's wrapped in pain and loss and impossibility. Hit that like button if this story moved you. Subscribe if you want to hear more about how faith, love, and divine appointments can transform your life. And most importantly, go out there and walk into some wrong rooms. You never know what miracles are waiting on the other side of that door. God bless you all, and remember, love always wins. Always.